Morning team, Macho Models, and what do you know, I am back with Gundam. So this morning I really wanted to talk to kind of the planning process and trying to figure out from a vision standpoint, what you want to get out of your build and where you want it to go. So I spent the better part of the last day or so just getting this basic arrangement laid out, and I wanted to talk to kind of the more why and a little bit of the how. So, kind of like upfront, the biggest compelling piece is that if you're interested in kind of storytelling elements and or creating dynamic visuals, I think it's really important to pause long before you actually start breaking apart the plastic and start putting stuff down. That you think about what the flow is of the model and how everything kind of pairs up and how everything balances. So throughout this, I'm going to kind of talk to like what the visual elements are that I like that brought me to this point, and see kind of what everybody else thinks. But I think this is kind of like a good introspective pause. So again, if this is for if you're interested in dynamic storytelling. Maybe you've seen other types of builds where you've admired Dio and you're attracted to it, but you haven't really kind of paused and thought why. Well, lo and behold, that's like a huge takeover from the art world, right? Like art is resonant with some, art isn't resonant with others. But that being said, I think there's some very kind of simple rules and or how you balance elements that can come together, and I'm going to try to highlight some of those for you guys here this morning. So I'm going to try to chunk this out and make it as fast and funny for you guys as possible, and then just boil it down to the bare essentials. So the first thing I wanted to talk to was just how each of the mechs are balanced out, right? And what you'll notice is that I really intentionally positioned the weapons on outside, right? So on the inside where, somebody's going to be looking through this model, I didn't want to have a visual element like, for instance, I didn't want the cannon on the inside where it could potentially obscure, the visual line on the front Gundam. The other piece too is from like a quote-unquote tactical perspective, right? You don't want to like flag the weapon, so I wouldn't want the barrel pointed to the back of somebody. That's dangerous when you're in a formation. So having it on the outside. Similarly too, you can see that this Gundam has it in its right hand, or GM, and then this GM has it in its left hand, right? And then you have your person on point here. Another kind of big piece too, while I'm talking about the actual kits themselves before I kind of dive into the smaller elements, is there's some storytelling in here, right? Like the person in the back is going to have the support pack, and then the person in the front, in theory, depending on how the squad leader wants to set up, is going to be a little bit less equipped, maybe a little more agile. The person to their left, it has the bazooka, right? So there's a pretty good mix of capabilities within this little squad. You have the heavy, you have the bazooka, and then you have somebody who can move light and fast. We've also laden down the heavy with all of the support equipment. So, these are some like very kind of like bigger picture, how are these people arranged? How are they grouped? What's going on? All right, the next element I wanted to talk to was the road that I laid out. So I struggled with this a little bit. I actually initially had the APCs positioned over here, kind of going across, but then I thought, okay, if this formation is walking in line and these Gundams are supporting these APCs, why would they be traveling across the path that they're walking? Ideally, they would all be walking in some sort of formation, and potentially the Gundams are there to support whatever is going on in here. So I arranged this road as such where it flows through, and a visual design element that I'm capping on is an S-curve, or it goes back to like a rule of thirds or a couple other design rules, but I wanted this to visually flow so it could kind of walk the viewer through, and it also creates like a sense of dynamism, right? Like the APCs and the soldiers are coming this way along with the Gundams. So visually I think there's a pretty decent amount of cohesion here. And I like how this is laid out. Another kind of piece too is, if you'll notice, I have the more plain APC in the back and the more laden down one up here in the front. Well, that's by design. So the GM that's going to be to the right of the APC is going to have a ton of support gear on it, right? So I thought to myself, okay, if there's support in the back, support should also be in the front, right? If this guy gets schwacked or this guy gets schwacked, there's a backup between them, and their spacing helps ensure survivability. So that's part of the story. And then also to just visually, right? Like this GM is going to be more complex looking than this APC. So those are all kind of balancing elements that I'm trying to arrange here with the diorama. Another piece I wanted to talk to you was how the terrain's laid out. So if you see, the road is pretty well delineated, right? And you can kind of see below Easy 8 right here, like I marked out where the feet are going to be. So if you'll notice, these are what are known as contour lines. Like if you read on a map, these are how they depict elevation. So you can see that on the Easy 8 section of the build, there's going to be just a little bit of terrain. So I'm going to try to maybe step it up by 1 to 2 parts. But then if you get over here on the GM in the rear, it's going to go up by 4. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to probably build an embankment that's maybe like a ½ an inch, maybe a full inch. I'm not really sure yet. I was also thinking about too, maybe cutting out some styrene and seeing kind of how all this lays out. If you go over here to the support GM, you can notice the little hatches. That's going to denote water. So there's a lot of elements coming into here, and I probably didn't even set the scene as to what the hell I'm doing here, but this is going to be a Vietnam type build. So I'm going to do high grass, but that being said, you know, they're kind of walking through a field. So the terrain isn't going to be super rolled. You know, there's not going to be giant elevation changes. It'll be more kind of like a gradual roll. Okay, I fudged the bucket a little bit in that last terrain piece, and if I hadn't said that I forgot, I could have probably just pushed on ahead with that, but here we are, let's hang out. So the larger intent of this build, and I'm sorry I didn't talk about this up front, is I want to do something Vietnam based. These are what are known as, let me get the label, I think it's M113s. Yes, so these are M113s. They are support vehicles, armored personnel carriers from Vietnam. And then I got these more modern Desert Storm figures, but I'm gonna paint them in OD green. But what I'm trying to go for here, and I have all my supplies on the way, is that Easy 8 is actually gonna be United Nations. So I haven't really thought through how I'm gonna depict that. I could kind of take the easy route and just take the blues and paint them the light blues, and then everything else would be white, or I might kind of mix things up. I haven't really figured that out. And then the 2 GMs are going to be US Army. So I'm actually going to paint them almost uniformly OD green. I'm going to more likely than not kind of break out. I'm not going for, you know, absolute historical accuracy. That's bonkers, but I want to try to be consistent with how the armor and the vehicles are laid out in the time. And, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, they're extremely monochromatic. So I'm going to try to think through, you know, ways that I can dress it up while still trying to kind of like retain some elements of that past. So I ordered decals, and there's a whole bunch of photo etches coming. I'm really excited for this. Hopefully next week when all the stuff lands, I'll do another video and I'll kind of talk to you about how I'm going to have everything laid out. I'm also hoping that, like, if I walk away from this basic sketch and I come back and I like it, I'm just going to go ahead and press forward with it. But if not, I might shift around some elements. I might try to maybe get some of the PE onto the Gundam so I can kind of see visually how everything lays out. But I like how all this looks. If you guys notice, I think a figure fell down in the back. Again, you know, really big important point. If you're trying to build dioramas and you want them to be visually interesting, I think it's really important to do this upfront work and just to sit with it and to kind of think about how everything flows. Envision, again, you know, balancing elements, storytelling is what you're doing, you know, consistent. You might even, heck, I'm even tempted to kind of send this to a couple of my like army buddies and say, hey, you know, from like a formation standpoint, does all this check out? Or, you know, something else. They might be like, yeah, knucklehead, like maybe we want to turn the bazooka actually out versus in, like the bazooka man wouldn't have the squad you know, pointed towards the other people. I'm like, hey, that's a great point. Same thing too, I'm going to mount some rifles and some packs, etc., etc. So it's cool. Again, it's all fantasy, but at the same point, if you're trying to, you know, be an accurate storyteller, I think like that's why some people are really attracted to like a James Cameron, for instance, right? He's a very, very intuitive and incisive storyteller, and he thinks through a lot of these types of things. And there's a plethora of other storytellers that I know are resonant with people, and I'd love for you guys to maybe jump up in the comments and offer up some opinions there. All right, y'all, that's it for the planning video for the Nam Gundam type stuff. I'm really excited to kick this off and get back into Gundam and building small plastic robots. I also hope that you took away from that to try to stop and think about what you want to build build and kind of how you want to arrange everything before you get into it. I know that in the past I've just kind of jumped into it and started cutting plastic and painting, but I'm trying to be more thoughtful and intentional, and hopefully there's some good nuggets of wisdom that you picked up. If you guys are watching this for the first time, I certainly appreciate the subscribe, and if you haven't, a subscribe is great too. A like and a comment would be killer. I love all the conversations that we're having down in the comments below. And of course, if you guys dig this video and some other stuff, I'd really appreciate if you visited Patreon and just left a little tip in the tip jar. I hope whatever you guys are working on, whatever you're getting after, whatever you're doing in life, you're out there and you're making it macho. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.